Okay, sorry about that. We're starting a little late, but we are going to go ahead and get started. My name is Corey Singleton, and thank you for attending this session, the Accessible Mason webinar session on multiple perspectives on implementing web accessibility in higher education. Sorry, clicking through a few things here. I wanted to say, I manage the Assistive Technology Initiative here at George Mason University, and I will be moderating the session. Our presenters for today are Christopher Moy, who is the ADA Coordinator with Montgomery College, Greg Krause, who is the IT Accessibility Coordinator with NC State University, Judith Risch is an attorney with the Office of Civil Rights in the U.S. Department of Education, and Kara Zirkel is the IT Accessibility Coordinator here at the Assistive Technology Initiative here at George Mason. Just a few housekeeping notes as we get started. If you're having issues with audio, please use the audio setup wizard. You can access that by the tools menu, then going under audio and then clicking through the audio setup wizard. There you can also, if you're having issues with audio through your computer, go ahead and use the telephone option. We can actually dial in, use the access code, and listen in through the teleconference bridge. This session is being recorded, and once it's done, give us about a day or two, but it should be up on our website, ati.gmu.edu/training/accessiblemasonwebinars.cfm. Some other notes, individuals, basically, during this session, we would like to get questions from the audience as much as possible. So go ahead and submit your questions now. We have folks actually pulling those to the side. And when it comes toward the latter part of this presentation, or this webinar rather, we will go on ahead and try to incorporate some of those questions into the Q&A session for our presenters. For those folks who need real-time captioning, it is available through the window menu under Show Closed Captioning, and then there are a couple of options here for whether you use a Mac or a PC. Screen reader users, we hope you actually went to, when we actually sent the information around over the past couple of days, we hope you went through and tested the session for accessibility just to make sure you can access all of the tools you needed to. Troubleshooting information, I would encourage you to just, if you get kicked out of the session and you're having some issues, you may have to update your Java, but go back to the support link under Blackboard Collaborate and actually go through checking your system requirements and configuring the room all over again if you get kicked out of the session and you're having issues with keeping a stable connection. And last but not least, I wanted to thank all of our presenters. They have donated their time and their expertise to today's session. We're very excited. We think you'll really enjoy the information that they're all willing to share today. I want to give thanks to Mason's Compliance, Diversity, and Ethics Office because that is the office that we are housed under, and they're very supportive of these kinds of efforts that we try to share information not only locally and here in the Mason community, but also nationally whenever we have the opportunity. And special thanks also to the Great Lakes ADA Center. They were very helpful back last fall when we actually did our first webinar in terms of helping us to figure out the different kinds of logistical issues that we needed to consider when we were setting up these sessions. So also you can actually follow the session live on Twitter at @AckMasonWeb, or #AckMasonWeb. We will be live tweeting the session as well. So now I am going to shut up and get out of the way so that our folks can talk. For today's agenda, Judith Risch from OCR will start off with the legal framework that will kind of guide today's discussion. And then our higher education panelists, Chris Moy, Greg Krause, and Kara Zirkel, will actually start to talk about some of the initiatives that they've implemented on their campus, the challenges and all those things to kind of consider if you're actually thinking about doing those things on your campus as well. And then again, as I said, we're going to try to do an audience and moderator Q&A towards the latter part of the session, so please send any questions in and we'll log them and try to include them when we start that, that particular piece. So now it is Judith's turn.
Thank you, Corey.
I will turn the mic over to her.
Thanks, Corey. I have to say up front, I don't always love the web format because I like to see an audience and hear them engage and ask questions as I present, so I will make that disclosure fully up front. But I think this is a really important topic, and I think it's something that's going to become a bigger issue every year as we're moving forward. I look at web accessibility most analogously to physical accessibility. Can you get in the building and get to the classrooms you need to? Can you use the bathrooms and those types of things? And the web is the same thing. Can I use the university's facility, being what you have on the web? And can I function and do that? So my office, the Office for Civil Rights, covers students with disabilities. And when we look at web accessibility, we look at it for those who use assistive technology to access the internet. And assistive technology is a broad term. It could be anything from an adaptive mouse to giving up your mouse completely and using just the keyboard or those types of things. More routine things are like JAWS, of course captioning on videos, and those many different things. And it's changing so fast that I'm not even up on everything that's out there. So this is clearly an emerging issue, and back several years ago, we were brainstorming options for a compliance review, which are proactive cases, and my office and I was part of the discussion, decided to look at web accessibility of the South Carolina Technical College system. And that was the first OCR case on that topic as a compliance review, and I'm going to talk about the case, but before we talk about that, I wanted to talk about a little bit of the underpinnings of the law and what really it says. Section 504 says no qualified person on the basis of disability should be excluded from participation in, denied the benefits of services, or be subject to discrimination under any program or activity which receives federal financial assistance. This includes a recipient in providing any aid or benefit or service. And it may not be directly from the university, but it could also be through contractual licensing or other arrangements that the college provides. And they need to provide this aid, benefit, and service in an that it is equally effective as those provided to others. There are times where different separate services are acceptable, but they still need to be equally effective to use. So we're not saying that having the internet is the only way to provide things. The problem, and I'll talk more about it, is this 24/7 nature of the internet and it always being there. And so that creates an issue. So that's 504 requirements. Title II, which applies to all public entities, so the public colleges, has similar provisions against discrimination as 504, and then goes further and says that it has to have specific provisions that cover communications. And it says a public entity shall take appropriate steps to ensure communications with applicants, participants, members of the public, and companions with disabilities are effective as those communications with others. So if you're communicating through email, you need to be communicating through email for everyone. So that leading up to this, those are the regulations that have been in place for many years. We also, then OCR and Department of Justice on June 29, 2010, released a joint Dear Colleague letter that, in summary, that summarized several cases that OCR had dealt with the emerging technology of e-readers. And in summary, these basically said that the universities agreed not to purchase, require, or recommend the use of any dedicated electronic book reader unless and until the device is fully accessible to individuals who are blind or who have low vision. Or the university provides a reasonable accommodation or modification so that the student can acquire the same information, engage in the same interactions, and enjoy the same services as a sighted student with substantially equivalent ease of use. And I think that becomes the crux of how you approach this. It becomes the substantially equivalent ease of use. That, to me, is the major part of it. So if a student has to carry around a 3,000-page book, it is not substantially equivalent. Whereas, well, I'm saying the student with a disability carries around a 3,000-page book, and a student without a disability can carry it around in an e-reader format. That is not substantially equivalent ease of use. There's a difference there. To follow up and to clarify this, on May 26, 2011, OCR issued a Dear Colleague letter with an FAQ for students with disabilities, focusing mostly on the visual impairment. And we came out clearly and said they have to be given the opportunity to acquire the same information, engage in the same interactions, and enjoy the same services as a cited student. So at this point, we're becoming very clear that you can't say because someone has a visual impairment, they can't take the class online. And we have to make online instruction accessible. And that became very clear in this document. The FAQ, which was part of that document on May 26, 2011, further clarifies that an accommodation or modification that is only available at certain times, such as an aid to read to a student, will not be considered equally effective and equally integrated, where other students have access to the same information at the same time or any location. So as with a case with online content, and I always use the example of libraries for students, and I remember being a graduate student myself, I did a lot of research at 2 in the morning at weird times, and I was doing it at my computer, not in a library. So if someone can use it at 2 in the morning, your student has to be, all students have to have access at 2 in the morning. So the FAQ makes it clear, and then that was the first part of the FAQ. The second part is the FAQ makes it clear that online programs are also covered, and it stresses the importance of planning to ensure accessibility from the onset. So we need to be planning that these programs are accessible up front. My experience is that these programs, they don't become accessible overnight, and it takes time to make them accessible. So if someone shows up and needs an accessible program, it needs to be done ahead of time. So with all of that underlying us, we started with the South Carolina Technical College System Review. And what we did is we looked at their policies and procedures. And these policies and procedures generally in this area implicate state laws at times because the states many of them have adopted the legal standard of Section 508. We also looked at, we also had to look at access when we were looking at things. We looked at websites, and we also requested access to password protected areas. So they were looking at email systems, the course management systems, whether online courses or general course management systems used as supplemental instructional materials, student information systems, student registration and grade reporting, and the libraries, of course. As part of the investigation, we talked to consumers. The people with the students with disabilities are the first line of how do we find out how we're really doing and what information do we really need. I also worked with my techs at the department, our tech people, to look at the web accessibility. I'm a lawyer. I'm by no means an accessibility person. The more I do, the more I understand, the more I know, but I'm not by any means an expert and a pro at this. So I worked with my ed technology people, and we found a lot of different problems throughout, and I've done several different cases at this point. In the K-12 arena and also in the higher ed arena, and also just looking at different websites from other technical systems projects and things. And the things we found are very consistent across the board in many places. So I don't want to be singling anyone out at this point, but these issues are very common. PDFs are missing tagging and alternative text for graphics, column identification, watermarks, and critical information is missing on PDFs. Videos did not have the proper labeling, and video controllers often aren't keyboard controllable. And also captioning is difficult to turn on and off with keyboard-only controls and types of things, or captioning being there, period. The website, on the websites themselves, alternative attributes were insufficient or missing. Fields requiring filling out were missing labels to enable a screen reader to help the user fill them out. Tables were missing headings, Course management systems, generally we're fine in this case. It's the content inside the course management systems themselves that are the issue. What the faculty and instructors are putting up. And some of these faculty put stuff up and are using it year after year after year. In one situation, we found a full movie up on the site. I'm not going to talk about any other legal issue that might come up with that, but for accessibility purposes, it was not accessible. The campus calendars, a really good place for not accessible to the screen reader, and those were the problems we found. Remember, we were just looking at a sampling. I can't look at every single web page or every single text, everything going on in a university. It's more just sampling, and generally it's not like we're digging very hard to find things in these cases these days. So we found several concerns. We approached the system, which is just a system and a conglomerate of schools. It is not anyone can really find the schools individually generally, but they can take some actions. So we found our findings. The threshold question is of what standard do we use to determine accessibility? I go back to the analogy of the physical accessibility. Where we have clear codes under Section 504 and Title II, we do not have a clear definitive code at this point. In this situation, this school had adopted Section 508, and many, many states have already adopted Section 508, which is actually a federal standard that applies to the federal government, and just states have adopted it because it's a clear standard. The other standard a lot of places use is WCAG. So those are the two options they used. They had adopted 508, so we could use 508. I will acknowledge, though, when we're doing testing and they haven't adopted a standard, we will loosely apply 508, but what I have to look at every time we do it, does it interfere with the ability of someone to use it? So one missing alt tag, while I don't endorse that or encourage it, is not going to destroy complete and total accessibility. Whereas a lack of captioning of a video that's critical will destroy accessibility and would be a complete violation. It's a really case-by-case individual call that we have to make on every decision when we're not purely using Section 508 and just using an readily accessible and usable standard. So I have to say that up front. So in this case, though, we were able to use Section 508. You need to look to your state law if that's applicable, and also to your own institutional policy, because in this case, the state did not have a law but had its own institutional policy. We also looked at we also considered the information from the staff and the students, and we made some determinations that the sites were not fully compliant with 508, which is the standard they had adopted. But the things we found, I will be candid, are things I find consistently in many settings. So I don't want to be singling them out on that topic. I can't stress that enough. So this was, as I said before, a system-wide compliance review. And after we found the problems, we had to go back to the system, who then has to put out something to push this down out into each of the individual schools. So they came out with a directive that we are currently monitoring, and the schools are supposed to be changing, but this takes several years after changes. Generally, we're giving anywhere between, so the cases I've worked on are anywhere between 14 and 24 months to get things fixed, and we shall see what happens in the fall, I guess, or so, when we get the next set of monitoring data on that topic. OCR does have further compliance reviews going on nationally at the time. We've had a few more cases since this one. I have closed another South Carolina one. It is in the K-12, district on web accessibility, also on virtual schools. With that said, we're generally in disability law and higher education. We can't look to K-12 as too binding because it's really different standards. Because this is more analogous to physical accessibility, what is coming out in the K-12 universe is applicable at the higher education level and vice versa. So I think it's something to keep in mind, because this is more like, do you have an elevator than it is, did you provide this accommodation? That's how I look at it. It is something to think about. DOJ has kept promising us some regulations on web accessibility, and those hopefully will come at some point. And I think our next big issue or trend, and I have not looked at any of them, and I'll be interested to hear, are the massive online course offerings, the MOOCs. I think are something that are going to be interesting to see how accessible and usable they are. I will say, having worked with a lot of schools in this process, I've talked to a lot of schools and see what schools are doing, and I have some schools out there that are really working hard and really change is happening and doing a great job at it. This is a really long and hard and complicated process, and it's completely overwhelming when you're starting it. And I think once you're in it and doing it, I think life gets a lot. It's easier once you're in the process, but to start the process is really hard. And to get the right players to the table, I think, can be difficult. And I think the other speakers here today will speak better about that. But I think it's really important, and it's something we all need to be thinking about and working towards on campuses. It's a really important issue, and a lot of different reasons about accessibility for people with disabilities. And one other thing I just want to mention, this is not just about, and some of our documents get conflicting, but not just about people with visual impairments. People require assistive technology to access the internet, have many different disabilities and require many different types of accommodations or adjustments or assistive technology to use the internet. So I think that's really important to keep in mind. And that's all I have.
All right, thanks, Judith. These are the links that actually Judith was referencing. We will be actually sharing this information after the presentations, or rather after today's webinar will be posted with a recording of the session as well. Next, we are going to move forward for the higher education panelists, Chris, Greg, and Kara. Chris is actually going to go first, and Chris, I'm going to turn over control to you. If you would just follow the left and right arrows to the top right of the PowerPoint, that's how you can actually control movement of the presentation slides.
Okay, thank you, Corey. So my name is Christopher Moy, and I am the Director of ADA Compliance at Montgomery College. Montgomery College is a large community college right outside.
Hey, Chris, you're a little bit low. You mind speaking a little louder? We're getting a few comments about people saying your audio is a little low.
Okay. Montgomery College is a large community college. We serve approximately 60,000 students. We are the largest institution in Maryland, and we have several campuses. We have 3 campuses and a large workforce development and continuing ed that has several off-site locations. So as you can imagine, with a large institution, we have numerous web pages and a lot of issues when we're addressing web and IT accessibility specifically. We have our workforce development who does very good on accessibility, and then the rest of the college who does something completely different. So I do kind of want to walk through. My role, I've been here about 4.5, 5 years. In my role, I report to the Office of Compliance, which is, a little different in that I do not supervise our DSS, but I do work collaboratively with them and then across the college to ensure that our facilities, technology, and services are accessible to individuals with disabilities.
Hey, Chris, we're still getting some more comments about you being a little low. If I can ask you to scream into the mic, that would be a little better, I think, for some folks.
Okay, I will try, certainly. Thank you. So our IT accessibility audit, this is an initiative that we've recently started within the last, I would say, year or two. And, it's something I've been talking about, I think, for the last 5 years since I've been here. But actually moving into the Office of Compliance has helped me in that I've been able to raise this to a risk level where we have it on a high risk for both probability and impact, that if the Department of Ed came in and did an audit on us, there would be a high impact in us in having to, like South Carolina system, to redo all our IT to make sure it's accessible. So being in the Office of Compliance has helped. Our accessibility project is really a joint project between communications, our Office of Information Technology, OIT, and the Office of Compliance. I say this in that communications is the office on the college who owns the web. They're the one who owns the content, and OIT are the ones who provide the resources, and then me, the Office of Compliance, is saying, okay, we have to be accessible. So, looking at kind of where we began and what we've done, currently in our first phase of our project, we're really focused on websites and media. That has been our sole focus. And, right now we were preparing for a web redesign. And our VP Advancement came to me asking, is our website accessible? And, actually my response back to him, well, no, it really wasn't. And he asked, could you tell me why it's not accessible or what's not accessible? And I can give him some high-level information, but really couldn't, give him specifics regarding our accessibility. So what we ended up doing was going out and actually getting a high-level audit done of our websites and our media. So we actually hired a vendor to come in and do automated testing and functional and manual testing. We gave them a list of, I think, our top 200 or so websites, kind of a broad view across the college to look at, how accessible were we, what were some of the issues that are presented in accessibility, and then kind of what we can do from there. When the audit came back, what was surprising to me and even to OIT was that we came back good. The audit came back that mostly we were accessible and there weren't too many issues with far as our website and issues as we are going along. This was a surprise, but we also knew that, okay, while it came back good, we knew there were still issues to be resolved. So as we dug deeper into the audit and we started doing scans ourselves and looking at our websites, we had identified 7 common template errors that were occurring on every single page that you would scan. And this is something kind of the low-hanging fruit that we can control within our template and change pretty quickly. These were contrast errors, color contrast, and having a reader on the page, and some very things that they were coming up as hits for accessibility, but there was something that we can control and make headway on right away. So we're working on designing a template that's accessible. One of the issues that we found early on when we were doing our audit was not all our pages were currently on our CMS or our content management system. So we are in an initiative now to push all our old legacy sites have to get on our CMS site. This helps in a compliance sense or accessibility sense because if we know our template's accessible, then we can somewhat control what's going on there to ensure that it's accessible. The sites were the .edu sites, they came up with multiple hits on them that they weren't accessible, and those were the sites that we're really having trouble with. The other thing we were dealing with is training and awareness for developers and content managers. This was big as we started working. One of the things, as I worked with OIT and I would give them scans of errors, and they would come back to me and say, I don't know what this means. I would give them accessibility, I'd run a scan for them, we'd do the manual and functional audit, send them the report errors, and I would get back, I'm not sure what this means or how we even address this. So there was some disconnect with, just the awareness in, what is accessibility for our developers and not to mention our content managers. So this is something that we have to go out and really train our content managers and developers on what these standards mean. What does it mean to be accessible? How do we design stuff that's both accessible and usable, for all individuals? So that's stuff that we're currently doing. We're also doing ongoing testing and making those testing results available to the entire college public. so that they can see, okay, my site is at a 50% health rating. What does that mean? Why is it only 50? So we're making some information available to them. And then also creating accessible documents. I know Judith, touched on just the PDF documents. And this is something we had found on numerous occasions, both through our financial aid and admissions process, that we had PDF forms out there for students to fill out that weren't form enabled. They weren't accessible to individuals who are blind. So we had blind students who would need to seek one-on-one assistance to get them done. So we're creating training now on, for our kind of student service, financial aid people, on how to create an accessible document. And this is something that we're working into existing trainings. So while we're not doing a completely new training, but we have trainings on, Microsoft Office or PowerPoint, we want to build accessibility into those trainings so people are aware of how to do that. So as we continue this year, what we've looked at, when we talk about instructional materials, one of the things we looked at and I did was do a survey of all our faculty on what instructional materials they were using. Because I want to get a sense of, okay, what is accessible, what's not accessible out there, and what are going to be the workarounds if something does happen. So we were able to really take a broad view and look at all the instructional materials that faculty are using in their classroom to teach. And so we can get an idea of, okay, how do we make this accessible, and how can we promote accessibility within the teaching modalities that faculty are using. In terms of web-based learning technologies, we're using a lot of Pearson products. Our developmental math course is all done by Pearson. We're using My Writing Lab. We're using a number of web-based learning technologies. And while these things say they're accessible, we know that they're not completely accessible, and it does take some work. So we're working with faculty that when they do have to customize, they understand what they're responsible for and what they have to do and make those web-based learning technologies accessible. The MyMC point is this is our intranet. This is the portal that students and faculty and others interact with to register for courses, to do their timesheets and stuff like that. And we're working on making sure that's accessible. On caption media, we've done a number of things with caption media in that we have a in-house MCTV. And what we've done with them is we've made sure whatever they're producing, that they're captioning their material. So everything that MCTV is producing for faculty, or if they're covering our president's address, or whatever they're doing, that we're ensuring that that information is captioned either live or it's captioned directly after when it's put up. So we're making an effort there to caption as much as the public information that we can that's going out to the community. We're also captioning on the student service side, those with a documented need. So students who are deaf, that our DSS works to identify which classes students are taking, and then they notify their professors before the semester starts, really to say, you have a student in your class who's going to need captioning. Are you using videos? Get those to us now so we can caption them. I realize that this approach, we really kind of want to get to a universal design approach and really caption everything. This is kind of our stopgap in that we know at least we're captioning what we need to caption until we can figure out, okay, where's the budget, where's the money going to come from? And that's really been a challenge of working with departments, working with different schools to say, okay, how are we going to caption everything? And then finally, training and awareness. We want to make sure that we're doing a lot of training and awareness on accessibility. And it's not just accessibility for students with disabilities, but accessibility for everyone. How can we get that message out? That it's it's usable. If we're creating stuff that's accessible, that means it's usable for everyone. In terms of procurement, we are working with procurement and the use of VPATs and making sure that the VPAT goes out with every bid and RFP that we have. The problem I've noticed with the VPAT, they come back, they say they're accessible, everything looks fine, and if you don't do the follow-up, if you don't, say, okay, tell me how you're accessible or what testing have you done, this has really been the problem because we've had cases where we've got a VPAT and I had someone come back and say, yeah, we're accessible. We bought the product only to find out later that, okay, what they said was accessible really wasn't accessible at all. So there had to be involvement from my office in terms of looking at, the product evaluations. An example of this, we recently went to an online course catalog. This was something that all students were going to have to interact with. So I was approached early on to be on the committee and to write the contract language in RFP to ensure accessibility was built in to the RFP. And so we purchased a product that based on the VPAT, based on some other things, that was pretty accessible. They had some exceptions. And now we're in the implementation phase of implementing our course catalog, and I was left off that committee. And so I politely went to the manager and said, could you please put me back on the implementation team, because while this is accessible, there is still some author-controlled content that we want to make sure that the information you're putting in is accessible. So this is stuff where I've had to make requests of people that, we need to be thinking about accessibility not only at the time of purchase, but as we're developing things, as we're putting things out. And we have numerous examples of this, from online course catalogs, or we're going to an online video, online orientation. So there's numerous things that we're trying to do more online to reach more people, but these are things that we have to ensure that they're accessible. And we also are looking at adopting a policy and procedure. We don't have a policy and procedure right now, so we're looking at really getting to Section 508 standards and adopting those standards. At this point, we are not anywhere near WCAG standards, and so we want to make sure we can at least get to 508 and make ourselves accessible. We're working, I've presented to our President's Exec Council on getting a policy passed. And then finally, what's next for us? As we look at kind of the IT accessibility, we're looking at this in a broad picture, and really, what's next through FY 15 through 17 is to audit our enterprise applications, our email systems, systems that everybody touches, including our employees. We have an HR system right now that is not completely accessible to employees. So this is something that, we're not just focused on the student, but focused on the college-wide, our employees, the community, and our students to make sure everything that we have is accessible to everyone. Audit our software and hardware. We have worked with our OIT to make sure we have language on software and hardware requests that get people to start thinking about accessibility. We're asking, is this product accessible? Do you need help researching accessibility? So it provides them a point of contact where they can come back to my office to really see, what can I do to make sure this is accessible, and audit our telecommunication systems. For the future, it was interesting. One of my OIT people came to me last week, and as we've been working through this, and he said, when you first started talking about this, I thought this was just going to be a trend, that it was only going to be here for a year and then gone. And, he's made the comment that, after I've heard you talk more and more about this, I realized that it's not just a trend, and that really this is kind of here to stay. And so, we need to do continued monitoring. This is something I've had to sell to the college that, this isn't just a kind of one-time, let's do an audit, find out how we are, and then that's all we need to do. But we do need to continue to monitor, to continue to scan, and ensure that our websites and technology are accessible to everyone. And then we want to have a sustainable program. And this is really getting accessibility into the fabric of the college. This is ensuring every time somebody is developing something, somebody is putting something together, that they're considering, is this accessible? It shouldn't no longer be, an afterthought. And that's what I've struggled with since I've been here, is people have come to me, long after, they have purchased something or implementing something, and now we realize that. And we've gotten to the point where now, we're looking at this at the beginning. They're involving my office to say, okay, Chris, do you need to be involved in, this RFP team or evaluating this to make sure things are accessible? It's truly the only way you make it sustainable if it's built in from the beginning, and it's really a culture change. Looking that, we should be accessible.
Hey, Chris, I'm sorry to jump in. I just want to make sure we get the other panelists in, and I'm gonna, and you'll still be on to answer some questions. So if you can wrap it up in the next few seconds, I'd appreciate that.
Okay, I'm done, Corey. Thank you. I'm all done.
Okay. Hi, my name is Greg Krause. Oh, I'm Greg Krause. I'm the University IT Accessibility Coordinator at North Carolina State University. And the perspective I bring is a little different in that I'm located in our central IT unit. And I work as a consultant across campus with faculty and content creators, and web developers, and basically everybody to consult on the accessibility of all aspects of what we do with IT. There we go. Okay. So what I want to talk about today are 4 different approaches that I take here on campus to trying to get accessibility to be more a part of everybody's job. Because it's way too big just to be my job. And so first thing I want to look at are what are some problems with implementing accessibility. And accessibility, it can be hard to understand. When you start talking about we have regulations we have to meet, people get afraid they're going to mess it up. Oftentimes it's non-technical people who have to fix these problems. They're not coders. And at the end of the day, sometimes accessibility is just not fun. And so it's more of a chore for a lot of people. So how do we begin to address some of those problems? So here I just have a screenshot of a typical accessibility audit report. It's quite dense, lots of information in here. This happens to be a web page accessibility report. And then you might read something like this and then get a follow-up document like, then you might have to say, go into this source code and fix something. And that can be a very intimidating task for a lot of people if they're trying to deal with accessibility. So I believe it was Aristotle who once said, if you want to become a Major League Baseball player, you cannot simply wake up one day and declare yourself a baseball player capable of hitting a curveball. You must become habituated in the ways of being a baseball player through a lifetime of practice. So hopefully there's some philosophy students out there who might catch that bad humor there. So what I want to take a sec to look at is, how do I become a Major League Baseball player? Well, first thing is I have to start easy. I have to gradually build my skill over time. And if I ultimately want to hit that curveball, I have to learn to start to see patterns, when the way the pitcher's moving, and how that ball's coming in, and then be able to react to that, and that reaction becomes more intuitive and natural over time, and I practice, and eventually I can become really good at doing this. So why would we expect being an accessible web developer, content creator to be any different? We need to start easy and gradually build up skills and not hit them with everything at one time, and give people the tools to be able to learn all of this. So what accessibility needs are achievable goals broken down into manageable tasks, and a way for everyone to be able to take responsibility for accessibility. So oftentimes they look at accessibility requirements like the WCAG documentation or something, and this is what they see. This is a picture of textbook War and Peace, but really what most of our users want is they just want the Cliff Notes version of it. Don't give me every gory detail about every aspect about the requirements. Just tell me what I need to know. So I'm going to talk about 4 different strategies we use here. First is quick training videos, and then our Web Accessibility Handbook, and then our IT Accessibility Quick Guides, and then our Accessibility Scan/Game that we do. So very first, quick training videos, and I'm just going to cover these at a very high level topic. I could talk for 20 to 30 minutes on each of these topics. But our quick training videos, the idea is to make short 5 to 10 minute videos that cover one specific topic. I'm not going to teach you everything you need to know about Microsoft Word accessibility in this one video. I'm going to teach you one thing. And I'm usually going to give you some action item that you can take from that. So just in case you want the URL, I'll just post the URL in the chat room there. So for instance, I have a video on how to create headings in Microsoft Word. And here I just put up a screen that shows some of the various quick training topics that we have. But again, they're very targeted things. It's not, I'm going to sit down and have to watch a video for 30 minutes. They're all closer to 5 minutes. Some of them go upwards of 10 about how do I use a specific tool, how do I learn a specific technique, or understand a specific concept. So it's giving bite-sized chunks of information for people to be able to start consuming this information instead of hitting it with everything at once. One of the other resources we have, this is more for us, more just for our web developers, is our IT Accessibility Handbook. And what this is, it's basically gives you a step-by-step guide for how to think about designing web applications and or web pages in an accessible way. Not taking it from the approach of I'm going to make a web page and then 2 days before we launch, come talk to Greg and say, hey, is this accessible? How do I make it accessible? But really starting to get you to think about accessible design patterns early on. So I mentioned WCAG 2, it's been mentioned a couple of times. The whole standard, it's around 14,000 words long. Last time I counted, which was a while ago, it's like 300,000 words of support documentation. That's not really the first place I want to send my web developers who don't want to become experts in web accessibility. Again, they want to know, what do I need to know now to get my job done? So in this handbook, it basically walks you through 6 steps. First, understand what are the accessibility requirements. Step 2, think about what the most appropriate technology is and document format that you want to use to match the task you're trying to accomplish. Don't just pick something because it's bright and shiny. And then it just walks through some basics of how to think about accessibility and talking about document structure, and then thinking about user interactions, and then alternate ways for users to interact with the content when they might have an impairment that might make it so they can't interact with it. So the third thing I want to talk about are our IT Accessibility Quick Guides, and these were designed primarily with faculty and content creators in mind. Again, people who don't necessarily want to become experts in all aspects of accessibility, but maybe they know, okay, I have a video. What do I need to be thinking about with videos to make them accessible? Or I have a Microsoft Word document, or I have a PDF, or I'm going to use Blackboard Collaborate. What are the things I need to consider when making these accessible? So what our quick guides do is they state what are our responsibilities as a university, and then it gives profiles of all the commonly used technologies on campus. And it talks about 3 things. It says, how do you build something accessibly with this tool? Then how do you check to see if it's accessible? And then where can you go to get more information? And so this screen just shows a little sample of 2 of the technologies on there. So for instance here, it shows for video and Microsoft Word. So for video, it's overview of how to build it accessibly. So it says include captions, use an accessible media player, and it gives some examples. And then going to the next column, how to check if it's accessible. So you should be able to view the captions, and you should be able to play, pause, fast forward, rewind, blah, 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 everything with the video controller just with your keyboard. So there's a simple user check that somebody who's not an accessibility expert can do to see if it's accessible, or at least most likely accessible. In Microsoft Word, it has similar things. How to build accessibly, use heading styles, use built-in format for bullet lists, avoid floating text boxes, add alternative text for images, do not save it as a web page. Then if you want to see if it's accessible, at least for on Windows, run the Word Accessibility Checker. So the last thing I want to talk about is our IT accessibility game. It's also it's actually our website scanning service, and it's something that we've custom built here. But so when you hear IT accessibility game, and you ask, can accessibility be fun, or should it really be a game? I mean, isn't this a human right? Should we be calling this a game? So when I say game, you might have heard the phrase gamification. That's one of the buzzwords for the past year or so. Gamification is just using game design elements in non-game context. So let me talk about why we're doing a game and how this works. So on campus, I am competing in a marketplace of demands. There are a lot of prioritizations put on other people's jobs. A lot of people just have to keep the lights on. They have production services to run and maintain. How do I get on their agenda to make accessibility important for them? It's when you look at something like security and compliance, that's easy to make a sell for because that impacts everyone. I mean, you just have to have something like Heartbleed come out, and all of a sudden everyone cares about security and compliance, while accessibility is kind of just for those people and not for everybody. So how do I get over those hurdles to get people involved? So some good gaming principles. A game lets everyone play regardless of their skill level. It lets you improve your skills over time, and it gives you instant feedback. There's several others principles, but those are the ones I've incorporated into our accessibility scan. So when I talk about an accessibility game, I'm not exactly talking about wheelchairs with lasers. It's a little more boring than that. But one of the things I want to do is make sure that this is a game everyone can play. So on the screen I have a picture of an Xbox controller, and you see all these buttons labeled. There's like 11 buttons, and I like to play games, but this controller intimidates me. There's so many buttons. What do they all do? Do I have to use all of them to play this game? Why do I need so many buttons? So when I'm talking about accessibility and accessibility reports, how do I get people over that fear factor and stop hitting them with everything, and how do I make it so they can engage with it? So really what I want to do is I want to create a game that's more like this, and this is a grandmother playing the Wii. And, she's I don't know what she's playing, tennis, bowling, I don't know. If you want to put a smile on your face, just go and do a Google search for old people playing Wii, and you come up with just some great images. I want, when somebody reads an accessibility report and engages my stuff, I want this to be the look on their face, and that they have fun doing this. So what do we do one other thing, another principle. So again, I play games. This is a game more from my youth here. If you ever played Super Mario Brothers, you don't win the game. Mario didn't save the princess in the very first world. It took a long time to build up the skills to be able to actually win the game. And so again, with this accessibility game that we have, you can still play and not feel like you have to get everything right the very first time. So what this game does is I basically scan your website for accessibility errors with automated tools, and then I go through and I prioritize which errors on your page are actually having the biggest negative impact on users. And then for those errors, or for all the errors, but I prioritize them for you, and I show you brief targeted instructions for how to correct that problem. And I will only show you one single type of error on a single page at a time. I'm not going to overwhelm you with, here are the 50 errors you have on this page. I'm going to give you one error to go fix, and then you can go deal with another one. And then the reason this is a game is because we rank the sites, and so every site knows that they are the 42nd most accessible site out of 440 sites, or how many ever we have now. Now, they don't know where everybody else ranks. They just know where they rank, and they can submit rescans as often as they want, and they can see how they can move up or down in the rankings, and there's some other stats they can get. And so this actually has incentivized several people across campus to get more involved in the accessibility of their websites. And we're actually in the middle of a contest right now. We have Global Accessibility Awareness Day is tomorrow, and we have a contest we've been running for a month to see which sites could improve accessibility the most over this past month. And so tomorrow I'll announce the winners of that. And here I've got a chart that kind of shows we've been doing this for a year. So there's two columns. There's blue and red, and but it's a set of a left column and a right column. And so the first set of columns, the blue ones, show you how many accessibility errors were fixed over each month over the past year. And then the columns where there are red columns, those are actually different contests we've run throughout the year. So you can kind of see sometimes all of the accessibility errors that were fixed, like for instance in the month of November, almost every single accessibility error in November was part of the contest. Whereas in September, we had almost 431,000 errors fixed and had nothing to do with the contest. People just went in and fixed it, and I didn't have to ask anybody to do anything. They just went and did it. And actually just ran the numbers right before this started. I even created this slide this morning about 8 o'clock. In our current contest, if you add up the last two columns, comes up to around 400,000 errors fixed. Between 8 a.m. and noon today, we've actually gone up to 962,000 errors fixed in this contest. So that May column is actually going to be significantly higher now. So again, this is with me just sending out a single email to say, hey, I'm holding a contest. Let's see who can win. It's not having to beat people over the heads to get them to actually fix their sites. So I think we'll have questions at the end. But really what I just wanted to show was some different approaches we take to empower people to take responsibility for their the accessibility of their content, whether they are administrative assistants who have been tasked with, hey, we need you to update our website that's done in WordPress versus a web developer. So I will leave it there, and I think Kara is now going to present next.
Thanks a lot, Greg. Kara, you're up now.
All right, so not to repeat too much of what everyone else has said, but we are set up a little different. What makes us unique is that compared to many other schools, you can see that we're completely separate of ITU and also the Disability Services Office. So this is a little different compared to what Greg was just talking about. We're set up a little similar to Chris, but we are just the Assistive Technology Initiative Office. So even though we are housed under Compliance, Diversity, and Ethics, we work with technology. So that means we provide accessible text, free captioning and audio description for Mason classes, AT assessments, and web accessibility compliance. We often collaborate with the Disability Services Office on a regular basis for accommodations and AT and overall accessibility, but we're structured a little differently in that aspect. Turn up. So training and awareness. Because we've been able to provide training across various areas of the campus working with ITU and ODS, for example, our ODS provides a training prior to every semester for those faculty who have students with disabilities registered in the class. We provide information in regard to e-learning accessibility with the Disability Office for all of the faculty and staff that are preparing for the semester. We also need some buy-in support. So we go from the high-level support, and the most important things that we look at from here are everyone needs to communicate. If we don't communicate, then we don't know what each other are working on, and then we don't want to have to replicate the information. We also need to be speaking the consistent language. A lot of times it might depend upon who you ask as to what the definition of accessibility is. And finally, we need to know where to go to for support. So very similar to how we do provide the free captioning and audio description, a lot of our faculty need to know where your resources are, and we try to market our information from there. We do have some collaborative efforts. We do chair an IT accessibility committee where key personnel from various areas discuss different problems and solutions. One of those has come out with, we have a bridge document along with some other guideline documents that we posted on our website. And we've also worked with Office of Disability Services to identify accessibility liaisons. So that way we have a go-to individual for each academic department, including the library, that will help us work with the different units based upon where our students with disabilities might be taking classes. So in regard to web compliance, Greg talked a lot about the web accessibility. We do look at the websites, but we also look at some of the content, the documents, the videos, and applications. We do use the term of e-learning to help cover a lot of the areas of web accessibility in the classroom. We too have developed a guide to creating accessible material that's located on our website of ati.gmu.edu. Type that in. And one of the areas that I've worked very closely with within the last couple years is our policies and procedures. So our Mason has an accessibility standard overall, and that's for the procurement, development, maintenance, and implementation. So this goes back to a little bit more of what Chris was talking about in regard to the implementation portion that he was having to be pushed out of and try to get back into. It is very important that we do look at the entire life cycle process of a purchase, whether it's from the beginning of it, of reviewing different applications, all the way through the development process, and finally to the implementation process. We too had a very similar example of looking at an email system, and I was on the original committee, but I wasn't on the implementation committee that ensured that training for the accessible version was part of what was also included. So similar to what Chris was talking about, it is very important to be part of that entire life cycle process. We've developed a lot of information. We do have an accessibility policy for the entire university, and we also have our internal procedures. We also have a procurement review contract. So we have an architecture review board, and it reviews new IT related to purchases for accessibility, security, compatibility of existing systems, and just to ensure that people aren't purchasing the same thing and having to spend extra money. And this architecture review board was actually something that came out of our technology unit that has been able to incorporate security, accessibility, and so on and so forth. So with that, they too have also produced a policy for procurement, and we are a part of that. And in regard to this, we've actually created guidance documents for individuals who are going to be on an RFP committee to review different proposals. We've created a guidance document for vendors trying to fill out a VPAT. Chris had mentioned also the VPATs themselves. We do ask for VPATs for all products that are being purchased, but we also look at it for manual testing as well and compare our manual testing to the VPAT, and we'll actually write a report and give any inconsistencies that there might be. Finally, we do have contract language that's included in all of our contracts, our addendums, and our RFPs, and all of this information can be located on our ati.gmu.edu website under the policies and procedures. So just looking at policy, some of the things that we try to ask is, do you sign off on policy or help write it? And what kind of policies apply to you? These are some things that we try to ask regardless of who the individual may be in regard to the roles and responsibilities here at Mason. Procurement is, do you sign off or make purchases, or do you make suggestions for purchases? And finally, do you participate in the RFP or other contract meetings? These are all areas that the liaisons or other individuals can bring up the term of accessibility just to get others in the room to think about. So I tried to do a quick brief after everything that Greg and Chris has talked about so we can have some room for questions that might be specific to those on the call.
Okay, thanks, Kara. I'm going to jump right into questions right now, and actually I'm going to move to the next slide. Just so you have, these are the email addresses of all the presenters. I just wanted to make sure you had that contact information just in case your question does not get asked. So I guess one common question that's jumped up for each of the presenters is, what about audio descriptions for videos? I guess the question would be, how is your campus or institution handling that? And maybe Judith, from your angle, what is what is OCR's perspective on how audio description should be handled by these institutions?
Do you want me to start, I guess? I mean, an audio description of a video, I mean, there needs to be captioning on a video. And this is where, you know, there's always the situation, and I analogize this back to physical accessibility, the student where the physical accessibility isn't going to work. The student is too limited in mobility that they can't even use the buttons to push the door to open the doors to get into the building. So we have to come up with some other way for the student to get in the building and accommodate that somehow. So there's always that option. So I don't know if audio descriptions for videos isn't something that I haven't seen as required under any regulation that I'm working in. I'm not, that we're working in, it hasn't come up. I'm not saying it won't be required at some point under some new regulation or some standard. So it's just not an issue we're dealing with. I mean, there are, and we acknowledge there are things that are very, very difficult to do to put alternative text on. For example, like the one that I always use when I do training on this is typography maps are always a complicated issue, and it is to the extent you can do it until it becomes an undue burden, administrative burden, or it's just practically impossible. The fact that it's going to cost you a bunch of money to retrofit something is not practically impossible. Not retrofit, but to make it accessible because you didn't do it to begin with, that is not practically impossible in my book. That is very different than there is no way to do this. And that's something to think about. So that's where I guess we stand on the audio descriptions of video. It's not something that's come up yet, per se, directly.
Okay.
Greg.
Anybody else want to add something?
Actually,
thanks, Judy.
Yeah. So the way we would handle it is on an as-needed basis. But I will say one of the things that I think several of us are interested to see how it's going to progress is when you read WCAG 2 in the level AA conformance, it does say that audio descriptions are required to meet AA conformance. And so I know I will be very interested to see what comes out with the Section 508 refresh in terms of the final guidance there, and then also if the ADA does point to a technical standard, what will be required there in regards to audio description. So I know several people are concerned about that.
I'm in agreement with you on the as-needed basis at this point, Chris. I don't think that. As I said, 504 does not, and as of now the ADA, but that may change, have a specific standard that we require. So I don't have an exact answer. It's still readily accessible and usable. And I hold out that, even if we do it all right, there's still going to be somebody that everything isn't, even if it's compliant to WCAG and 508, which is not legally required, it's still not going to work for some certain specific small percentage of the population with disabilities, and we will have to go to an individual accommodation in that narrow population.
Okay, thanks, Judith. Let's go ahead and move on to one of the other questions. Chris, this is actually specifically for you. This is, I think, from the group of James Madison. It says, we have similar challenges with our web developers not knowing how to fix accessibility problems. What kind of training resources is Montgomery College using to train developers?
We are actually developing a training now, and we're going through the vendor that we're using, and we're using Compliant Sheriff to develop a developer's training specifically on the standards. And we're training our, what does the WCAG standards, what do they mean, and how do we address them? Some just a basic, understanding of what these standards are. That's the type of training that we're really targeting, for them and getting them so they understand, okay, this is an error and this is why the error. We're also working with them one-on-one. I was able to hire an IT accessibility person within my office who will be working with them one-on-one to show them good design and why is it good design, and using JAWS, using different programs, so when they're doing testing, they have an understanding of, okay, if I'm a blind person or a person with a disability, I understand now why this is an issue. So it's really kind of getting down to their level and demonstrating some of those things of, okay, why is this really an issue that we develop it this way?
Okay, thanks, Chris. All right, this is actually for all of the panelists. Can the speakers give an idea of the dollar cost of the types of culture change to achieve accessibility? So I think essentially how much is it costing to implement accessibility on your campuses?
This is Greg. First thing I'll point out is a report that, oh gosh, now I forgot the name of the group, NCDAE, WebAIM's also affiliated with them, that they're doing some cost analysis on that exact question. And I think it's going to vary depending on school to school. I'd say cost you definitely need to keep in mind. I think it's very difficult to do accessibility if you don't have a person that is all they do. And I don't mean just providing accommodations for students. I mean actually someone as an evangelist and as a trainer and as a consultant to go out to campus to provide those services. So I'd say you're looking at least one FTE right there for a person there. If you do want some scanning software, it ranges from, you can get some pretty cheap stuff for a couple $100 to $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, depending on what level of service you want, and that can vary quite a bit. So yeah, say the FTE, the scanning software if you want that. There might be some additional software that you might want to buy to assist people, although there's a whole lot of free tools out there. So there's not a whole lot of stuff you got to buy. So I'd say that in terms of dollar cost, but then you have to, the other cost would be making sure that all of your, in the case of web developers across campus, as part of their jobs, realize that they're now responsible for accessibility. So a small portion of their job now is to make sure whatever they're doing is accessible. So that means they've got to take the time to go and do, ask the questions, do the testing, get training and all that kind of stuff. So there's those kind of costs too.
Yeah, and this is Kara. The cost of implementing accessibility in the long run is always going to be cheaper than not implementing accessibility, in the fact that someone can't always file a complaint with Judy's group and everything else in regard to that issue that they may run into. It's best really to start with something for your scanning, whether it's Wave, one of the free tools, the WAT, the Paciello group toolbar for IE. Get something started so you can kind of get some numbers started within your web accessibility and the problems that you have, and then start with that to help write yourself a proposal for an automated system, whether it's going to be Compliance Sheriff that Chris and them are using. We use SSB BART AMP. Greg has been able to work with SortSite and has developed some of his own stuff. But you got to get a number to get started to help yourself write a proposal. One of the things that we were able to do with our captioning was we had the need, and we were able to put a proposal together that started out relatively low on Corey, 25 to 35. I think maybe the first year, just to kind of get us started with all of the equipment, a couple part-time students to do captioning in-house. And that's allowed us to really grow because our numbers have tripled within 2 to 3 years, and that's allowed us to start bringing in more money. So it really kind of depends upon where you are, how large the campus, and like Greg had said, is really you have to have someone, an FTE, to get things started, but you have to also have some numbers to get yourself pushing a proposal together too.
Okay, I'll jump in here with the next question. I think these two are actually for you, Greg. First, who tends to respond to your contests, faculty, staff, or IT staff? And would you be willing to release the game code as open source?
So most people respond are actually web developers. whether they're true coders or whether they just learned some Dreamweaver. So it's typically support staff who are participating. And in terms of sharing the code, we are looking at ways to do that. We're in discussion with our tech transfer office to find out ways to do that. Part of what powers our engine is also licensed technology that we've licensed from someone else, and so there's some complications there, but yes, we are actively trying to figure out a way to make this available in some form or fashion.
All right, thank you, Greg. We have about 10 more minutes or so I'll try to get through some more questions here. A question came in, and this is actually to everybody on the panel. Do any of you have any insights into e-learning products like Articulate Studio, Storyboard, Kaltura, Adobe e-learning suite, and SoftChalk?
I know for Mason, we have a lot of information that we have already reviewed in our guidebook for accessible materials that's located on our ETI site. We've looked at a few of those. Kaltura we do have implemented here, but we also try to add to that as we see new products being used on campus. Respondus is one of the newest ones we're looking at, as well as we're looking at all the Adobe products and things like that. Greg, I know you've done a lot also in that same area.
Yeah, in fact, I just did an evaluation of Articulate. It has limited accessibility. So for that particular product, the user is, if they use an assistive technology, they're probably going to have to be on Windows using IE to do it because it's a Flash-based product. Their HTML5 output is not accessible. And even the accessible version, it depends how you're using Articulate, how accessible or inaccessible it will be. So it's a mixed bag. I think a lot, my experience is a lot of these authoring tools that create these rich environments at best are a mixed bag for accessibility, and oftentimes don't have any accessibility. So we have a lot of people on campus who use Camtasia to do things, but unfortunately Camtasia has, they used to have a more accessible player. Than their latest version of their software, they made their player inaccessible. So we give guidance to people to say it's fine to record with Camtasia, but take the exported MP4 file and put it in one of our other more accessible media players. We're a big media site campus, and so I've worked with Sonic Foundry to make MediaSite accessible, so they're able to put the videos in MediaSite, or we've got an open source player that people can use. But my experience with a lot of those products is it's a mixed bag at best for accessibility.
Yeah, this is Chris. Storyboard is one that came up for us just recently in looking at our colleges moving towards an online orientation and wanting to use Storyboard. And this was brought to me, almost after the fact, a little later than I would have liked. And we looked at the VPAD and we looked at one of their model schools that they pointed to. And, we did find numerous accessibility errors within Storyboard and, the college that they pointed to in using that. And what the VPAT said was there was a lot of exemptions on, it depends on how the author creates the content. So going back and working with the individuals who are going to be using Storyboard, my recommendation was we need to work with you kind of one-on-one to ensure that the content you're putting up there is going to be accessible for all students who are going to be using it.
So I would like to add one thing about VPATs, because a lot of these products do have VPATs, voluntary product accessibility templates. As someone who looks at a lot of VPATs and has to make a determination based on them, VPATs are I won't even call them a good starting point, they are a starting point. In my experience, most VPATs are not accurate enough to really be able to tell you whether a product is accessible or not. I saw, those same VPATs for, well, I hesitate to say that because I might be confusing my product evaluations, but there was a product I just evaluated where I read the VPAT, which made it sound like it was going to be perfectly accessible. But then when I actually go in to test it, it had numerous problems with it. So VPATs, like I say, are a starting point, but they cannot be the end of the discussion in determining how accessible a product is because they simply are not accurate enough to make that determination.
And this is Kara. One piece to add to that also is if you do ever ask a vendor for a VPAT and they ask you what is it and they don't know, it's a clear question of just running away. VPATs in this day and age is really like still using a flip phone. For the vendors, they should know what a VPAT is by this point in time. It's been requested and asked since about 2001 when the Section 508 standards came out. So that's a quick way just to be able to determine how aware a vendor might be. But we've also developed some language to where we will have VPATs for all of our applications. And if we do see that an application may not be as accessible as what the VPAT states, we will still hold them to the level of compliance that they put in the VPAT themselves. So if they lie and make themselves sound better than what they do, it only hurts themselves. So in that regard, within our guidance document for VPATs, we try to make sure that they spend a little bit more time on their VPATs to be a little more sincere in that regard. It's not going to be a, believe everything you see kind of thing, but it's still going to be helpful than not having anything at all. So.
All right, I'll jump back in here. Chris, I think this question was directly for you. What product do you use for Portal?
Say that again?
I think the question is, what product do you use for Portal? P-O-R-T-A-L, Portal? Not sure?
Portal? I'm not really sure I understand.
I'll see if we can get some clarity on it. But
elaborate what we're using?
All right, so we're going to move on to the next question. Next question, what AT compatibility testing, Kara, this is for you, are you doing separate from 508 conformance? How do you validate the true accessibility of E&IT products before acceptance? And what is the full range of AT and disabilities included?
In a perfect world or currently? I ask that only because ideally, given the time and resources and money, if we had it available, ideally it would be to review the application with multiple assistive technologies and multiple versions, such as compatibility of browsers, the usability factor, usability testing, screen readers, voice recognition software, screen magnifiers, and things like that. Given that we've built ourselves up to having 4 full-time folks and 2 part-time folks, and that's been a huge development even within the last couple years. We currently only have time to test it with a screen reader. We do try to use a couple different screen readers sometimes, mostly because the scripting right now for screen readers and voice recognition overlap about 70%, to where if we do have any other inconsistencies, we are still covered for the vendor to make those changes based upon any problems we find if we have any other users finding accessibility issues within our contract language, and we also provide risk analysis reports for all of our testing. So I hope that helps answer it, but right now we really look at WCAG 2.0, Section 508. We have VPATs for both of those areas that the vendors fill out, and we do manual and automated testing.
So I'd like to add in one in there that anybody can do, even if you don't have any accessibility expertise or have no idea how to use a screen reader. If you get an application, push your mouse to the side and try to use the thing with your keyboard, because that will actually be very revealing as to how accessible it is, and will actually help reveal whether some aspects of it are accessible to screen readers. So just that's actually the very first assistive technology test I do is actually just my keyboard only. Can I do it?
Yeah, we do have a checklist area that we do use for those who may be wanting to learn how to test. And the very first thing on our checklist also is keyboard access. Throw away the mouse and can you tab and access everything on the screen without it. Everybody in the room can see that.
All right, I appreciate it, Kara. This is where it's a minute left in the session. I'm going to go ahead and cut off questions for now, but I have left this slide up here which includes the email addresses of all the presenters. If there's a specific question that you have that was not answered, I would encourage you to reach out to them and try to see if you can get your questions answered directly. Again, I want to thank everybody for participating in today's session. Sorry that we got started late. If you would like to come back and review this session at another time, it will be archived on our website. Give us about a day or two, but you can. These are the links that are provided for our website, ati.gmu.edu, and under training, you can click on the Accessible Mason webinars link, and you'll find that information posted there. You can also go directly to our website and just navigate through the training links to try and find the webinars if you are unable to use that top link. Thanks again to the presenters. If you have any questions for me or my office, you can reach out to us. This is our contact information as well. We will be bringing another webinar to you in the fall. We'll probably post our, at least the schedule of our webinars over the summer sometime so that people are aware when we're going to host them. And you can also follow us on Twitter at Accessible Mason. Thank you for participating. Thank you to the presenters for all the rich and very detailed information that they provided today. And have a great week.